Hi, I'm Richard. I buried my mother alone because my wife chose that moment to make me choose, her or the woman who raised me. She said I was wasting my loyalty on the dying. Then, she took the house, turned my kids against me, and skipped the funeral. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was, I saw it coming, and I stayed too long anyway. Why? I was chopping onions, not because dinner called for them, but because it gave my hands something to do. Candace moved around the kitchen behind me, but it was like sharing space with a stranger. She didn't hum like she used to. She didn't ask about my day. She was dressed in something far too elegant for meatloaf. I'd retired 3 months ago, and I thought that would bring us closer. Thought we'd finally have time. Walks in Forest Park, morning coffee on the porch, laughter. But lately, her silence had weight. I glanced over. She was setting the table, her eyes fixed on each fork like they'd done something wrong. I almost said something, almost asked why she hadn't gone to see my mother last week. But the timing never felt right. And now, I could tell. Something was coming. That quiet storm behind her eyes. It had been brewing for days. "I need to talk to you," she said, folding her hands over her lap at the dinner table. "All right," I replied, still holding the serving spoon midair. "This isn't easy," she continued, "but I've thought about it a lot." Her tone was too even, practiced. My chest tightened. "I can't keep doing this, Richard. I need you to choose. It's either me or your mother." At first, I thought I misheard her. The sound of the ceiling fan above us buzzed louder than it should have. I blinked. "You're asking me to choose between you and my dying mother? She's not just dying. She's been dying for 2 years. Meanwhile, I've been here, alone, playing second to a hospital bed." I stared at her. This woman, who once sat beside me in church and cried during hymns, was now stone. Her voice was flat, her jaw firm. "You think I haven't noticed?" she snapped. "Every time I mention dinner plans, you say, 'Let me check with Mom's schedule.' I married a husband, not a caregiver. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just listened." And while she spoke, something in me stepped back, observed her. Not my wife, not my partner, but someone else entirely, someone unfamiliar. There had been signs. How she'd sigh when I answered my mother's calls. How she suddenly had plans on days I asked her to visit the hospice. How she referred to Mom as your situation. I placed my napkin on the table. "Are you sure this is what you want to say to me?" She didn't flinch. "Absolutely." And that was it. "You've always been too loyal to the wrong people," she added, as if she needed to twist the knife. My father's voice echoed in my memory. "Character is who you are when no one's watching." And right then, I saw her for who she really was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't beg. Instead, I took a deep breath. Then slowly, I reached for my wedding ring and slid it off my finger. It felt heavier than usual. I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time in years, I didn't see love. Yes, I saw control. I set the ring down right in front of her salad fork. Her eyes didn't follow it. "You just made this easy," I said. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I stood, grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, and walked toward the front door. Behind me, silence. Not a protest. Not even a question. I opened the door. The evening breeze kissed my face like freedom. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, not with a slam, but with a soft click. That click echoed louder than anything we'd said at the table. I got in my truck, turned the key, and let the engine hum beneath me. I didn't have a destination, just away. The sky was turning lavender, that soft kind of dusk that fools you into thinking everything's peaceful. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "Mom, I needed to see her." Her voice came back to me from last week's call, cracking, tired, but warm. "Richard, you've always been my rock. I'm so proud of the man you became." She never asked for anything, not once. She just loved, unconditionally, even when she had nothing to give but her time and prayers. I thought about the nights she worked late, the mornings she packed my lunch even when her hands ached from cleaning houses. Candace never understood that kind of love. Maybe she didn't want to. I drove past familiar streets, streetlights blinking to life. I wasn't running away. I was choosing peace over pretense. The ring I left behind shimmered in my mind, like a relic of a contract long expired. I smiled, took off the wedding ring, left. I said it out loud, not as a line from a story, but as my truth. I pulled over near the river. Parked. Let the tears come, not loud, not heavy, just quiet release, one after another. I wasn't broken. I was free. I looked up at the sky, then back at the rearview mirror. The reflection of my bare hand resting on the steering wheel felt lighter. Candace would go on. She always landed on her feet. But me, I had somewhere I needed to be. Mom. I wiped my face, turned the key again. I didn't know what I'd find when I got there. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't be arriving as a husband. I'd be arriving as a son. I didn't rush getting out of the truck. Just sat there in the dark, staring at the low-lit windows of the hospice center. Funny how places meant for endings always look so calm from the outside, like they were hiding what really went on inside. Slow, quiet farewells no one ever felt ready for. The air still carried the aftertaste of the dinner I never touched. I let my hands rest on the wheel for a while. The ring was gone. Candace was behind me. All that was left now was this moment. Just me and Mom. I finally stepped out, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The front doors slid open without a sound. Inside, the lighting was soft, almost too soft, like they didn't want to startle anyone. A nurse at the front desk looked up and gave me that familiar half smile. She didn't need my name. Just missed the doctor, she said, voice low. She's stable. Resting. Thanks, I nodded, already moving. The air smelled like antiseptic and lavender, clinical but not cold. I walked past rooms with doors cracked open where families whispered prayers or just sat, letting silence say what words couldn't. Some folks came for love. Some came for signatures. You could feel the difference. Her room was down the hall, third on the left. Always had that pink yarn cross hanging on the doorknob, something one of the nurses made for her. I eased the door open. There she was, Evelyn. She was smaller now. Not just thin, small, like life had quietly folded her in on herself. Her hair, though, was brushed, neatly parted. That was always her thing. Even when she worked graveyard shifts at the diner, she never left the house without her hair done. You greet the world how you want to be remembered, she'd say. I pulled a chair close and sat beside her, reached out. Her hand was cool but not cold, fragile, but still hers. I left her, I whispered. Just like that. Took the ring off, walked out. I chose you. She didn't move. But I swear, her face softened just a little. Maybe it was the dim light, or maybe something in her still knew. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too deep in something else, resolve maybe, or just the quiet hum of finally doing something that felt right. The machines beeped in the background, not urgent, just steady, a heartbeat I'd grown to lean on. I chose right, I told her. Even if I waited too long. There was a pause in me, deep and wide, like a canyon I hadn't crossed yet. I'm sorry I missed so many calls. Sorry I put her first when you needed me. I looked down at her fingers. No rings, just thin, worn skin and veins like roads on a map. I thought about all the times Candace called it running to mommy, as if choosing compassion made me weak. Truth is, I'd been afraid, not of her dying, but of what that would leave me with, the silence after, the regret. A single tear slid from her eye. She didn't wake, didn't speak, but I saw it. And it leveled me more than 1,000 words. I leaned in and kissed her forehead, whispered, "You're not alone, not tonight." Later, I found the night nurse in the hallway. "I'd like to stay," I said, "if that's okay." She nodded. "We'll bring a blanket." Back in the room, I pulled out an old paperback from my coat pocket, To Kill a Mockingbird. It had her name written on the inside cover in faded blue ink. She used to read it to me when I was sick, voice full of meaning even when the words made no sense to me yet. I read out loud now, quietly. In the name of God, do your duty. Each word felt heavier than the last. Each line, a thread connecting us. I paused and looked over at her. Still sleeping, still here. Being right is easy, I whispered, remembering her words. Being kind when you're right, that's the hard part. I closed the book and sat there in silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 3 voicemails, all from Candace. I stared at the screen a moment, then swiped. Delete, delete, delete. Around 3 in the morning, I must have dozed off in the chair. The room hadn't changed, but something had. I could feel it before I even looked. Her chest didn't rise. The monitors were still. A peace had settled in. I stood, no panic, no gasp, just presence. I took her hand again, still warm. Thank you, I said, for all of it. The door opened gently. The nurse stepped in, saw everything without needing a word. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It stayed there a moment longer than necessary. I leaned down, kissed her forehead again. Goodbye, Mom. No theatrics, no big goodbye. Just presence, just truth. Love isn't loud. It's not always wrapped in holidays and celebrations. Sometimes it's in the quiet choice to sit by someone's side when the rest of the world turns away. As I walked out of that hospice into the cold morning air, I knew I wasn't going back to my old life, and they had no idea what was coming. The sky hadn't decided what to do yet, gray and stretched, like it too hadn't slept. I walked the empty sidewalk as the world began its morning routine. Dog walkers, joggers, people with coffee cups and earbuds, none of them looked up, which suited me fine. My steps were slow, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't ready to go home. Home, whatever that meant now. Last night had been quiet in the way a storm is quiet after it's passed, but leaves everything destroyed in its wake. She left in silence. No drama, no final words. Just gone. I couldn't stop thinking about the stillness of her room, the way the air shifted when her breath didn't come again. That kind of quiet doesn't scream. It lingers. It stays. Candace hadn't called. Not once. No texts. Nothing since those voicemails I deleted. I wondered if she expected me to come crawling back, or if this was her way of winning. Not through love, but through silence. A flower shop opened early near the corner. A bell chimed when I stepped in. The woman behind the counter looked surprised to see anyone at that hour. "One lily," I said. She wrapped it gently. "Someone special?" I nodded once. "The best." When I got to the house, I hesitated at the door. It felt different now, like I was entering someone else's place, like she still lived there, but I didn't. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Richard, it's Gerald, Candace's brother. We hadn't spoken in years." "She's been crying all night," he started, his tone flat but blaming. "She says you just left." I did. Silence. Then, "She's torn up." I took a breath. "My mother passed a few hours ago." The pause was longer this time. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She ever mention a will?" "What?" "Candace said there were rumors about property, maybe some savings." "Your mom never talked to you about it?" I could hear something in his voice, like he wasn't calling for Candace, like he had his own angle. "No," I said. "She didn't." He didn't press, just grunted a kind of thanks and hung up. That's when it clicked. Candace's sudden interest in my mother, after years of eye rolls and skipped visits, it was never about family. It was about what she thought she could gain. I went upstairs and pulled the old wooden box from the closet, the one Mom gave me last Christmas. Said I'd know when to open it. Inside were photos, me as a baby, her at her first waitress job, a birthday card I'd made with crayons, a locket, then the envelope. For Richard, only after I'm gone. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. Her handwriting was still strong, slanted. The first line hit me straight in the gut. "My boy, I've left you nothing but what matters." She wrote about pride, about kindness, about choosing love when it costs you. She told me not to fight over her things because none of it mattered. Fight for what I taught you. There was no mention of money, no list of who gets what, just memories, morals, and a goodbye full of grace. I folded the letter and placed it back gently. She'd given me everything already. Candace wouldn't understand that. Later that morning, I stood in the kitchen making coffee. Same machine, same counter where Candace once leaned and called Mom a burden. Her words echoed now, but they no longer stung. They simply explained her. Grief does strange things to people. Some drown in it, others use it. I checked my email, a message from the hospice. No estate documents, no will filed, no surprises. I saved the email. Not because I feared a fight, but to protect what little peace I had left. I called Mark, an old buddy from law school, not to start a battle, but to make sure no one used Mom's name for leverage. Evening crept in. I heard a car pull into the driveway. And didn't have to look. Knew it was her. She walked in without knocking. Same attitude. Arms crossed, like she was walking into a courtroom. "Did she leave you everything?" she asked, voice sweet with sarcasm. I didn't bite. "She didn't leave a will," I said. "She left me a letter." "Oh, how convenient," she said, rolling her eyes. "It wasn't about property," I told her. "It was about values." She paced a little, then snapped. "You expect me to believe that? After everything? You think I'm that stupid?" I didn't argue, just looked at her. "We both know what this is really about," I said. I walked to the table, set the letter down gently, and stepped back. She didn't move, didn't follow when I turned away. I went upstairs. Her silence didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like calculation. And for the first time, that house didn't belong to her. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not anymore. I thought her silence that night was acceptance. I didn't realize it was strategy. I stepped through the front door and the air struck me, colder, heavier than when I left. The walls held echoes, shadows lined corners. Candace's perfume still lingered as if she were here seconds ago. One of her slippers sat half-pushed under the couch. A chair in the living room was turned at an odd angle. Home had never felt more foreign. I carried the lily bouquet in hand. I set it gently in the corner near the hallway entrance. Hands tight, breathing steady, I thought, home is where your presence is acknowledged. I've been a ghost here too long. Every room remembers me more than she does. I squared my shoulders and moved through the hallway toward the heart of conflict. She appeared in the doorway to the living room as I reached the threshold. "You think you can come back and act like nothing happened?" She spat. Her voice was sharp, brittle. She blasted accusations. "You're hiding money. You're using grief as theater. Always playing the victim." Her tone was swift, practiced. She held up the sealed envelope, claimed I'd withheld parts, manipulated what Mom really meant. I saw anger in her eyes, reproach hidden just beneath. I stayed still, calm. I let her words hail. There was no rant from me, no concession. She wanted fire. I chose steel. She demanded I explain. I responded, "I have nothing to hide, except my pride in choosing right when wrong would have been easier." Words landed firm in the silence between us. It wasn't about her accusations. It was about power. Her voice raised. Tara appeared, wide-eyed, along with Clint, crossing the threshold behind her. Suddenly, the kitchen and dining room were fronts of war. Tara immediately backed Candace, saying, "I deserve the truth. Dad, what aren't you saying?" Clint remained in the background, anxious, silent. I looked at my children, their faces torn. I placed the envelope on the coffee table, letting the weight of its presence settle. I spoke slowly. This letter, this was her voice after all lies, all harm. She taught me integrity under pressure. I mentioned Mom's lessons. Stand when it hurts. Tell truth even if it breaks. I locked eyes with Tara. "Do you believe truth matters when it hurts?" The question hung, charged. Candace's lips curled. She lunged forward, slamming her hand against the table. The photo frame on the table cracked, glass spidering out. I flinched but stayed planted. My mind traveled back to gentler days, when Candace once defended Mom at church, when she'd say, "Your mother raised a good man." That young woman had vanished. I contrasted what she was now with who she was before. I breathed. Quieter now, I said. You changed. I stayed trying to love what we were. The tension stretched sharp. She swallowed. Anger flickered in her eyes. Wounded denial. I stepped toward the broken frame, placed a hand over the jagged shards and said, "This ends tonight. Not with shouting, but with truth." Her breath caught. Shock rippled. I called out, voice steady, "If this was ever about me, fine. But using my mother's voice to manipulate, that's beneath you. No shout, no demand, just the truth laid bare." Without waiting for a response, I turned, walked out of the room, left the frame, cracked, behind me. Silence trailed as I closed the door. I walked into the quiet hallway and felt something shift. She had no idea how much she'd awakened. When I stepped back into the house that night, the air didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. The walls didn't echo warmth, just silence and distance. I walked down the hallway and past the family portrait, the one that's been hanging there for nearly 2 decades. I stopped. My breath caught. Something was off. I looked closer. My mother's face, gone. Her image had been digitally erased from the frame, just an empty chair between my father and me, like she was never there. A chill crept up my spine. First the memories, now the reflection. I stood frozen, staring. That photo used to hang above my childhood bed. I remembered the day it was taken. My mother had just come back from a double shift, hair pinned up, lipstick smudged, but smiling like she owned the world. Now she was missing. I turned around. Candace was in the next room. She looked startled when our eyes met. She knew, whatever this was, it wasn't an accident. She stepped into the hallway. "You think you're clever," she said, eyes narrowed. "Planting this. Trying to make me look crazy?" I didn't respond, just stared. She gestured toward the altered portrait. "I didn't touch that. You did, trying to gaslight me, make me doubt what I remember." I stepped forward, calm. "You've changed more than the picture, Candace." She bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" I said nothing, just kept my gaze steady. She jabbed her finger toward the frame. "I haven't done a damn thing to that photo. You're paranoid." I exhaled. "You told Tara my mother was a financial burden, that she held up the estate. You said that in this house." "I heard you." She flinched. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out for a second. Then she snapped. "I was venting. We were frustrated. That's not the same as—" "It is," I interrupted. "It's exactly the same. You're trying to rewrite her place in this family." Candace threw up her hands. "You always twist everything. You want a villain? Fine, I'll be your villain." I turned, walked toward the study without another word. In the dim light of the study, I sat at my desk and searched my computer. Deep in the drive, I found it, a folder labeled Family Archive. I don't remember creating it, but there it was. Inside, the full digital image, the real one. My mother, front and center, smiling. Not erased. I checked the file history. It had been moved last week. The user login, Candace's name. There it was, no speculation, no suspicion, just fact. I copied the file to a USB drive, then locked the folder behind a new password. She could delete what she wanted on the surface, but not here, not the original. I remembered something my mother told me years ago when Dad died. They can change what's visible, but they can't erase what's real. I whispered it to myself as I closed the laptop. The rest of the house sat quiet, but not peaceful. In the living room, I saw her heels still by the door. Tara's scarf tossed across the banister. Clint's phone screened down on the counter. Everyone was here, and yet it felt like I was standing alone. I sank into the old armchair that used to be my father's. The leather cracked a little as it took my weight. I remembered Mom sitting here, legs tucked under her, humming to herself as she read the paper. I sat still, then whispered to no one. I refused to be erased. I reached for my phone, called Marlon. "I need your help," I said. "Not for a lawsuit, just be ready. Someone's messing with more than memories." He didn't ask for details. "I'll be on standby." Later that night, something stirred. A click. Soft. Deliberate. I opened my eyes and sat up. Another click. I crept down the hallway, barefoot, quiet. The soft blue light from the portrait niche glowed faintly ahead. Then I saw her, Candace, standing before the frame, phone in hand, flashlight on. I watched as she tapped the smart frame, trying to navigate, erasing again, perhaps hiding what had returned. I stepped forward. She turned, froze. We stood still for a moment, just two people who used to love each other, now strangers beneath the same roof. "I guess that confirms it," I said. Her voice didn't come. I looked at the frame, then back at her. "History matters," I said. "And you just proved it." She said nothing, didn't deny it, didn't move. I turned, walked away, left her standing in the soft glow of the frame, my mother's image lit behind her, untouched. No more words, just the hum of the digital frame and the quiet betrayal between us. I woke to silence again. The dawn light filtered through curtains I hadn't drawn, sketching lines across the floor. The envelope from Mom lay folded on the nightstand. I stared at her handwriting, each letter a breath from her, now echoing in absence. I reread her words, felt them weigh on my chest. "Fight for what I taught you." That became my guiding line. I got up and booted my laptop. I drafted a detailed email. Not angry, just facts. The metadata changes, the name under which the portrait file was moved, the timeline, and my commitment to honor Mom's legacy. I sent it to Marlon, to Tara, and to the lawyer who handled hospice paperwork. Then I waited. Minutes dragged, hours stretched. My inbox showed sent, but no replies, no blue ticks, nothing. Silence seemed to convey more than any words could. Something inside me hardened. If silence is the weapon, I'll wield noise. I stood, paced the study, inhaled cold air, exhaled resolve. I'd been passive too long. This next move had to hit where it hurt and be undeniable. I opened the county property records online, typing an address, scrolling through deeds, documents, then it was there, the title transfer. My name removed. Candace and Tara now listed as joint owners. The shock hit me like a hammer, but outwardly I stayed calm. I printed every page, stamped each with date and time, notarized copies. I recalled when Mom and I refinanced the house during her illness, always in my name. Why? Because she trusted me to carry on, and she trusted that I'd never betray her. But someone did. That betrayal wasn't metaphorical. It was legal, definitive. I called Marlon. His voice crackled over the line. Yes, the transfer was valid on paper, but legally challengeable with proof of foul play and undue influence. He'd help me build that case, let the law expose what words could not. Later, in the living room, Candace walked in, phone in hand. She glanced at the stack of printed documents on the coffee table. Her face shifted, defiance draining, shock rising. Without emotion, I laid the most damning pages down in front of her. "You didn't just steal a document," I said. "You tried to steal my life story," Candace stammered. I was protecting what she left, making sure things stayed in the family." Her voice cracked at the end. I didn't flinch. "Your future built on theft is no future at all." I left the deed where she could see it, framed, public, undeniable. Then I turned and walked out of the room, chest heavy, purpose renewed. I headed toward Mom's old room. The house settled behind me. In the quiet, I sank into her rocking chair, the one she used when reading scripture late at night. The leather creaked under me. I ran my fingers along the arms, remembering her laughter echoing in that room, her small voice reading bedtime stories. I whispered into the empty space. They tried to erase her, and me through her. Not anymore. I went to the desk and placed the lily from my pocket beside the folded envelope. I stood and walked out through the front door into the Portland afternoon. The doors closed behind me with authority. The deed rested in my jacket pocket. The house may no longer claim me on paper, but I still held the truth. I asked them to come. Candace, Tara, Clint, all gathered at the dining room table. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, like it knew this was important. I sat down and placed Mom's sealed envelope in front of me. Beside it, the printed deed and the metadata logs. I caught Candace's glance. She wasn't ready. But neither was I. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Tell him, I forgive him. He tried. The name Evelyn echoed in that room, sharper than any accusation. Candace's face drained, her defenses fading. I placed the documents beside the recorder. The title transfer, the false user login, everything laid bare. Tara gasped. Clint stared at the floor. Candace's voice trembled. That's fake. She denied. She said these files were manipulated. She said someone framed her. I held up the evidence. Logs, timestamps, legal counsel notes. You didn't just erase my mother, I said. You tried to erase me through her. The room swallowed itself in heavy silence. I asked about the contract, the one Evelyn allegedly signed, binding me to silence for property rights. Candace froze. She stammered. Tara defended her. It was for protection. But I wasn't convinced. I ripped the papers open. The clauses were clear. Loyalty, obedience, forfeiture if I abandoned her or their joint business. Love turned into contract. Trust held hostage. Voices broke. Candace accused me of bitterness, loss, being lost without her. But I quoted Maya Angelou. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Tara sobbed. She confessed guilt over siding with Mom's memory or her mother. Clint didn't speak. The silence between us was heavy. Candace rose, her chair scraping the floor. She left the room, papers left scattered across the table. I stayed behind, alone with truth. I folded the contract, the deed, and the recorder, slid them into my jacket. I whispered to the empty chairs. Truth doesn't always heal wounds, but silence kills them slower. Sunlight came through windows I'd ignored for too long. It fell across the wreckage of our family. I breathed deep, felt the weight lift a little. I walked out through the door she built with lies, not waiting for denial. I walked free. The morning of the funeral was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in feeling. I stood in front of the mirror, tightening a tie I hadn't worn since Evelyn's memorial. The photo niche in the hallway was still empty, where her portrait once hung. That blank space said more than any framed image ever could. Guests began to arrive. Quiet hellos, handshakes too soft, like they were afraid to touch anything real. Candace's side of the family clustered near the church entrance, offering shallow glances, whispering judgments. I walked past them and made my way to the front, down the center aisle. The casket was closed. That was her wish. No spectacle, just dignity. I glanced around. Still no sign of Candace. Then a phone rang, muffled from a coat pocket near the back. The screen lit up, an unfamiliar number, but the name that popped up hit me like ice. Candace. I stared at it. No one moved to answer. I turned and kept walking. The pastor opened with prayer. I rose slowly to speak. My hands trembled, but my voice stayed even. I scanned the crowd, faces stiff with politeness, but no wife among them. The silence became a character of its own. She's not coming, someone whispered behind me. I let the question hang in the room. Then I said, if grief had an address, it's not in her absence. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their heads. I opened Mom's letter, the one she'd written in her final days. I read her words, not about pain or regret, but about kindness, forgiveness, and dignity. Tara's eyes were glassy. Clint looked like he wanted to leave. Others just stared ahead, uncertain where to look. When I stepped down, I didn't return to my seat. I walked to the side hallway and pulled out the phone again. The missed call had no number now, just unknown. I answered on instinct. Is this Mr. Wright? A woman's voice asked. I paused. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to call someone else. I didn't speak. Something was wrong. She was too quick to hang up, too rehearsed. Who calls a dead woman's number by mistake on her funeral day? That wasn't a mistake. That was a message, a control play. I knew Candace too well not to hear her fingerprints in that silence. Back at the burial site, most guests had drifted off. I stayed behind. I stood by the grave, alone with my thoughts. The sun had shifted just enough to cast my shadow across her casket. You told me to speak the truth when it's hardest, I whispered. I hope she hears this. I laid her letter, creased and stained with thumbprints, on the coffin. Then I turned to Marlon, who waited a respectful distance away. I nodded. It was time. He left to issue the press notice, one we'd prepared days earlier. The metadata, the title theft, the truth in Evelyn's name, not for revenge, but for clarity. The storm was over. Now came the clearing. I walked from the cemetery into light that stung my eyes. My jacket hung over one arm. The lily I'd carried since the second chapter was curled now, soft and tired, but intact. Just like me, I didn't turn back again. Not once. They may have taken the house. They tried to take my name, but they can never take my voice. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral. The house had settled into a strange kind of quiet, one that didn't ache anymore. I woke before the sun, poured myself a black coffee, and sat by the window. The morning light crept through the blinds, catching the edge of the photo frames on the mantel. My mother's portrait now sat beside my father's. It didn't look forced, it looked earned. Outside, the neighborhood was still asleep. I stepped out front to check the mailbox, a habit more than a need. Bills, ads, and one envelope with no return address, handwritten. I stood there holding it for a while, recognizing the loops in the letters before I even opened it. Candace. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table. I didn't tear it open. Just slid my thumb under the seal and unfolded the note like it was fragile. It was short, careful, measured in tone. She didn't beg. She didn't justify. She said she couldn't bring herself to walk into the church, that seeing herself in the mirror lately had been punishment enough. She talked about growing up with a mother who left, how she thought she'd broken the cycle by staying, but staying in a place just to control it, that wasn't strength. She didn't ask me to respond. Didn't say, let's fix it. She ended with, I hope peace finds you before pride does. I folded the letter slowly, sat still for a long time. Then I stood, walked to the den, and placed the letter in a drawer with others I'd kept. Some I'd written, some I hadn't had the nerve to send. I locked the drawer. Sometimes silence says enough. That afternoon, I walked to the riverside bench where my mother and I used to talk. The trees swayed gently above, sunlight blinking through like it wasn't sure whether to stay or go. I sat, let the sounds of ducks and water fill in the spaces where thoughts used to crowd me. A woman sat down on the far side of the bench. Didn't speak, just nodded slightly, then looked away. Life does that sometimes. Slides in next to you without words, just presence, a reminder. I left a lily on the bench before I stood up, cut fresh from the garden this morning. You're not a ghost in this city, I whispered. You're part of its breath. Later that week, I invited Marlon and a few of the guys over for dinner. Nothing formal, just old records playing, beer on the counter, and meatloaf from one of Mom's old recipe cards, molasses, glaze, and all. There was laughter, the kind that wasn't forced. Even Clint showed up, quiet but there. He brought a pie, overbaked, but no one said a word. When dinner ended, I raised a glass. No more waiting for funerals, I said. We do this monthly. To living, Marlon toasted, not just surviving. That night, after the dishes were done and the house was still again, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not for anyone else, not for publication, just for me. I wrote about Mom's final months, her questions, her quiet strength. I wrote about the fight over truth and the price of standing in it. Then I began a letter to myself. I ended it with a sentence I never thought I'd believe. Some battles are won when we choose not to fight anymore. I folded that letter and placed it beside Candace's in the drawer, locked it, turned off the light. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to explain tomorrow. I smiled one last time, not for anyone watching, just for myself.